Hi, my name's Trevor. I'm from the AWS SDKs and Tools team. I'm here to talk about our AWS SDKs release process. And mostly I'm going to be focusing on how to engage us and what you can expect as a service team during this process. I'm from the SDKs and Tools team. We're responsible for all of the open source software that we deliver for AWS, including the SDK for Java, .NET, Ruby, PHP, Python, JavaScript, CLI, C++, Golang, bunch of tools. We are also part of the AWS API review process. This includes getting your APIs reviewed, signed off by a bar raiser, and one of the things that is helpful to understand is that every AWS API needs to go through API bar raising. This helps ensure that we have a high quality bar. AWS APIs are consistent moving forward. At the time of this recording, there's almost 100 different services, and it's very important to our customers that knowledge they learn in one service can translate to another service, and this just helps protect the customer experience. So when to engage? If you're a service team and you're working on a new feature to an existing service, or you're a new service team, it's very important to engage us as early as possible in your release process. However, you may not know, it's also very important to engage us when you are rolling out to a new region, or even if you're just having your web API documentation updated. All four of these different types of updates will manifest as changes to our SDKs and tools. I'll talk about each type of update and what you should expect during those. If you're a new service, as I mentioned, engage us as early as possible. When you create the SIM with us, we'll use that to track progress, your release dates, important discussions that we have during reviews. Also, when you open the SIM, you will be assigned an AWS API reviewer and a bar raiser. When that happens, you should immediately schedule an API consultation. It's very important as a new service that you get feedback early in your process about your API, rather than when you're a month away or 2 months away from shipping it publicly. By engaging early, you will save yourself a lot of headache in the long run. Also, please note that if you are a new service and you hold an early API consultation, this does not constitute a final checkoff for your API release. You need to make sure that you have final service models and definitions that are signed off by an API reviewer prior to getting your service released. If you're an existing service, the process is much shorter, but it's still very much the same. You have to provide us models that go through an API review. For updates to existing services, that will often happen over CR, and we only need to meet in person if there are complex changes or if the reviewer has questions or concerns about your update. When you are rolling out your service into new regions, it's important to talk to us. Most of the time, this is pretty much a zero-touch update from the SDK's perspective. You will contact RIP, you will modify the list of regions that you're in, and that will roll through to our SDKs and roll out. However, there are other exceptions to this, such as expanding into regions outside of the AWS partition, such as AWS CN, AWS US Gov, or private partitions. Also, any non-standard endpoints, you must contact us to see how that might impact our tools. SDK interfaces that allow customers to enumerate regions exist in a bunch of our tools, including the CLI. For this reason, we need to know when you're in new regions so that these enumerations can continue to work correctly. Most of the time, region updates will be handled completely by interacting with RIP, the region information provider. But you still open a SIM with the AWS SDKs and tools. Lastly, there's documentation-only updates. This is a very quick process. There's no API review needed, but you still open a SIM with us so that we can get your model inputs and then update our SDKs. If you have any questions about these, what type of update you have, or whether you need to go through our release process, you can either contact AWS API Review for feedback or AWS DR Tools for SDK specific questions. Now, how do you engage us? The easiest way is to go to this tiny URL link. You can also find this link on the SDKs wiki. So wiki SDK. By following this link, you'll be prompted to open a SIM issue with the SDKs and tools team. And you will be prompted to provide information as to what type of update it is: a new service, an update to an existing service, region expansion, or documentation changes. This is the part of the process that will assign to you an API reviewer and a bar raiser. During the release, or during this process, you can expect a few standard things to happen. So, first thing is you'll be engaged on SIM. And you will be asked to provide a Coral model. If you're a new service, then you'll be asked to have an API consultation. The model that you provide us will then be filtered through some of our build tools. We have some internal tools that will test the build of your model against our SDKs. It will also provide some linting, similar to check style for Java. We have Coral Cop for Coral models that will check all the common, edge cases and exceptions that we don't allow in models. Service teams are then asked to address API review feedback and Coral Cop feedback. And we do this in a loop until the service team is both happy with their model and the API reviewers are happy with the model. At this point, an SDK can be released as long as you have your Coral model, a completed API review, documentation, and release notes. And given those 4 items, it's just a minimum of 1 business day. You provide us all those inputs by 3 p.m. on one day, and we will release the following business day. During the API review process, when you're engaged with an API reviewer and a bar raiser, you can expect them to ask questions both in terms of feedback received from Coral Cop. If you're an existing service, there may be a lot of Coral Cop output that you're going to have to ignore to remain internally consistent. If you're a new service, you're expected to follow all Coral Cop recommendations. And then there's also an API standards wiki linked here that will go into all of the AWS API standards that you're expected to follow. We are currently evolving our release process. While the inputs will not change, you still need to have a service definition, you still need to have documentation, you still need to have release notes. We are making it possible for service teams to self-service their release on their own timetables. You provide all the same inputs, but you will get to drive the scheduling of all of these things and the release process. Lastly, if you are a non-Coral backed service, there's some additional considerations. Most of our release process is optimized for services running a Coral stack. We glean a lot of confidence and we have a lot of shared tooling for working with Coral models. It's popular for some new services to run on top of API Gateway and Lambda and things. And there are some specific considerations and risks that we need to identify and try to mitigate as early as possible if you're not running on Coral. So if you're a new service and you are building a non-Coral stack, please reach out to us right away so that we can make sure that we get all these concerns addressed. Lastly, if you want to read a detailed wiki about some of our service update release processes and policies, you can go to this wiki. You can navigate to that from the SDKs and tools wiki as well. I hope this short informational video helps. Again, if you have questions, reach out to AWS DR Tools or to AWS API Reviews. And thank you. Have a nice day.